This Hispanic Heritage Month, several cities across the country canceling celebrations in fear of ICE raids.
Chicago's Cinco de Mayo parade has been put on pause this year. Organizers say it was canceled because of fears over President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown.
With the Supreme Court's ruling to allow immigration raids to continue, many in the community are now fearful to celebrate during Hispanic Heritage Month.
Fears of being targeted or arrested by ICE being felt around the country also hit close to home in the Pacific Northwest, in a region where diverse Mexican and Latina communities grow larger each year. Several cultural events celebrating those communities have been canceled or moved online in 2025, like a Mexican Independence Day celebration in Hillsborough, a Latino Fest in Madras, a Folklorico festival in Seattle, a multi-day Tacos y Tequila event in Spokane, and the list goes on. Despite this heightened fear, a festival that's given Mexicans in Oregon a sense of home for over 60 years decided to carry on. Fiesta Mexicana was born as a celebration, and over the years, it's become something more, too, an act of resistance.
Well, I think it's a very important event to have every year because this is the only thing we have for us.
I'm getting emotional because home is important. And so when I think about Fiesta Mexicana, I think about it being like a little slice of my home.
From the Gert Boyle Studio, I'm Jen Chavez, and this is The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. Today, the story of Fiesta Mexicana, its history, how it represents cultura, resiliencia y resistencia today, and what it means to Mexicans around Oregon. Alicia Avila produced a documentary for OPB's Oregon Experience called Fiesta y Resistencia, and she joins us to break down the story. Alicia, thank you so much for coming to the studio today to talk about your new documentary.
Of course, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Elida Cifuentes is a former council member for the city of Woodburn. She moved to Oregon long ago, but this festival is what gives her a sense of being at home.
I grew up in a very small town in Texas, but then I came to Oregon and I was lost with the culture because I had never been around a lot of Anglos.
So, Alicia, you and I are also not from Oregon. We're from California. We're also both Mexican. Latina culture can feel just like more present and accessible in everyday life there, I think. Folks speaking Spanish in public, Mexican and Latina street vendors and restaurants all over the place, music, events, a sense of community. So I get what Elida is saying about feeling cultural loss moving to such a white state like Oregon. I wonder, did you feel any sense of loss like that when you moved here? And do you see Fiesta Mexicana as a place of home?
Yeah, this question gets straight to my heart, like me duele el alma when I think about all of the things that I miss about being surrounded by the culture that I grew up in. I have lived in Portland for nearly a decade now, and every single time that I come back from California or any other big city that I've lived in, me hace falta, cuando llego me hace falta escuchar el español, me hace falta estar en comunidad, and it's something that I actively seek out being here in Oregon. I actively seek out those spaces where I can speak Spanish, where I can exist in Spanish, and Fiesta Mexicana is one of those places. Es un lugar where I can just show up and exist in Spanish, which is like my most authentic self.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way when I leave and come back to Oregon. I think, growing up, I didn't speak Spanish in the home, but I was always surrounded by bilingual folks or people speaking Spanish or people speaking Spanglish just in the hallways at my schools and out walking down the street. And it's so noticeable, the lack of that in public spaces here in Portland or elsewhere in Oregon. And I know the first time I went to Fiesta Mexicana, that was something that stood out to me so much. Like the fact that the dominant language being spoken around me was in Spanish. And when other people were speaking to me, they spoke Spanish to me first before English instead of the other way around. And I was like, I don't know that I've ever experienced this in Oregon. And I feel like what you say about having to work harder to stay grounded in that in a white space like Oregon is something that I really relate to and try to do on a regular basis. But it is like something you have to do for yourself and create for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I can say, part of that active effort is just being an active participant in the community. And if I hear, just the other day I went to dinner with my friend and someone was speaking Spanish on the street and I absolutely approached them and I said, hey, I speak Spanish too. And I think it's really important for that visibility. Like we need to be able to see each other.
Mm-hmm.
And people are always happy to be approached. Like, because it isn't such a common thing to hear here in Oregon, people are excited to be approached by another Spanish speaker. And it seems kind of funny or strange, but yeah, it's definitely like the celebration in active resistance to just walk around, speak in Spanish, find other Spanish speakers, and be able to actively work on building that community.
This sense of, I think it's isolation that folks feel. Like I hear Elita talking about, she's like not used to being around so many Anglos. And it's like, it does make you feel isolated. And this place where it's obviously that sense of isolation falls away is just so powerful. Like people are just together being happy, being themselves. And I think the first time I experienced that as a participant, as an attendee of Fiesta Mexicana, it was really powerful to me as well. Let's back up. Let's get into the history of Woodburn, which is where this fiesta happens every year. I know you did some research into years past and the beginning of the festival. What kind of place was it when this got started in the 1960s?
Yeah, we can actually go back a little bit further than that. So in the 1960s, Woodburn was a fairly small town. I believe the 1960 census listed the population just over 7,000. And the 60s was a time when Woodburn was actively growing. It still is. But at the time, it had only been a few years since the end of the Bracero program. And this program was a federal, executive order that was signed by President Roosevelt. And the goal was to supplement labor during World War II. So there were folks that were working in these communities, working in agriculture, and they were leaving to fight in the war. And the Bracero program was a partnership between the United States and Mexico. And they brought over the course of the program, over 500,000 Mexican workers year after year to fulfill the needs of the agricultural labor. And after coming for several years, some of these men started to decide that they wanted to settle in the U.S. and they wanted to settle in those towns that they were familiar with, that they were working in, so they brought their families with them. And so in the 1960s, places like Woodburn are growing because we're seeing an increase of these families that are starting to settle. And if you visit Woodburn today, outside of Fiesta, it has a really busy main street where there are still a lot of Mexican businesses, and there are a lot of businesses that have been there for a really long time. They've been there this entire time when all of these families have been settling this region.
So it was in this time and place that Fiesta Mexicana was born. How did the community members who lived there get it going?
Yeah, so in 1963, a group of community members decided that they wanted to celebrate the end of the harvest, so the end of the pisca in Woodburn. And they decided that the easiest way was to partner with the church. So they partnered with the church to promote the event, to bring the community together. There was food. They had a court of princesses like they do today. And it was also a fundraiser to help raise funds for whatever needs the community had at the time. And that's really how it started, a small celebration, neighbors inviting each other, friends and family inviting each other. The Veliz family, who participated in the Colegio Cesar Chavez project, was also one of the founding families of this event. And so it's 1963, people are starting to get together, and they really just want to be able to celebrate the work and the labor and the efforts of the growing Latina community of the time.
It's so cool to hear you talk about like families who were involved at the very beginning. And I know a lot of the people who are vendors at Fiesta Mexicana today are folks that grew up going to the festival, like Berenice Emilian Rodriguez. She's a second-generation vendor there.
I basically grew up doing this since I was like probably 9 years old. It's just a family thing that we do each year.
And I think this really speaks to the kind of place this is for folks. We keep talking about home. That's part of what our whole podcast, our show is about. And that's really what this place is for so many people.
Well, my kids, they grew up here with us. Sometimes we would get a sleeping bag and they would be asleep under the tables, but they look forward to every year. My grandson, looks forward to every year. He's excited. He counts down the weeks. From once it hits 4th of July, he's counting each week for this event.
A lot of vendors have their children helping them, and now their children are grown adults, and their children are helping them, just like Berenice. She was a kid who was helping her parents run this business, run this elote stand at the Woodburn Fiesta Mexicana. She actually moved away for a while, but made it a point to come back every year for Fiesta Mexicana to continue to support her family, until at a certain point, when her kids were growing up, she was feeling like, this is a significant enough part of my life that we need to come back. We need to come back to Woodburn and be more active in this community because this is our home. So Berenice moved back, and she has been an active vendor of Fiesta for several years now. Her grandchildren now come to Fiesta. And that's a really common theme with the vendors and with attendees. There are a lot of folks who grew up, remember the courts when they were teenagers, remember the princesses, and now their children and grandchildren are wanting to participate in these same events.
Let's just give people a sense of what this festival is like, what it looks like, what it sounds like, even what it smells like. Alicia, do you want to get us going?
Yeah, this festival, it sounds like home. Let's start with the music. Cuando llegas a Fiesta Mexicana, you're listening to all of this Spanish, Mexican music. Hay mariachi, hay danza azteca. There's Selena playing on the speakers. Those are the songs of my childhood. And then the scents, what does it feel like to smell your home? What does it feel like to smell the family kitchen? I don't know why I'm getting emotional because home is important.
Mm-hmm.
And so the scents remind me of the kitchens that I grew up in. My grandmother, de la cocina de mi mamá, all of the scents of the spices, the food being prepared, my favorite snacks, the scent of onions and cilantro and all of the mixes of spices, the scent of elote. It's so unique. You can't find it anywhere else. And the taste is also really unique. I think this is the only place where there are multiple elote and esquite vendors that you can find in a single place in the state of Oregon in a single window of time. All of that is a representation of home. And what does it look like? It is so colorful and joyful. It's almost like a tangible experience of joy to be surrounded by all of these colors that I grew up with, to see the Mexican flag, the little tiny Mexican flag on all of the snacks that I just kind of want to steal and keep and put in my plants. All of those colors that represent the joy of my culture, of who I am.
For me, one of my favorite things that I had there when I was at Fiesta Mexicana this year was like fresh fruit. I had a cup of mango and watermelon with tahini and lime and hot sauce, and I was like, with a little Mexican flag on top, I was like, yes, 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 yes. Smells, like sensory memories like this trigger emotions and trigger this sense of home in a way that I'm like not surprised that it's an emotional experience for you and other people who attend. Another thing that I really noticed that made me really happy, and like I was thinking about and I was talking to some of the other folks that I was there with, is just like what a great event it is for families. Like to hear you talk about people like their kids and their grandkids are getting involved, like the lucha libre, like the matches that they had, there was like 50 kids just like losing their mind. They were like, ah! And there were like rides, and there was like, you could get like snacks, and you could get like curly fries and like desserts and like tacos and elote and esquites. And it's just like, it just felt like such a wonderful place to like bring like generations of families bringing into this place. And so that was something I really noticed, like all the children there that were having a great time. Also, Selena, one of the first years I went, the Woodburn High School mariachi band performed a Selena song, and I was like, this is heaven. So yeah, +1 on everything you said, basically.
I mean, if you think about it, it feels almost like a tangible experience of joy. You know what I mean? Like you're there, you're in community, and you feel the joy. You feel the presence of all of that. And yeah, I don't think that there are many experiences quite like that in the Pacific Northwest.
I think so too. And I feel like when we're talking about an act of like resistance, I do see joy as an act of resistance. Coming up after a break, more about what Fiesta Mexicana means for Mexicans in Oregon. Stay with us. Thanks for listening to The Evergreen, our podcast from OPB about the place you call home. If you like what you hear, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, and we'll brighten your Monday morning a little bit with something new and exciting and maybe even joyful to listen to each week. You can also follow OPB on Instagram at OPBphoto, or follow me directly at Jen Chavez OPB. That's Jen with 2 N's, and I'll keep you posted on everything Team Evergreen is up to. And remember, this episode about Fiesta Mexicana, Oregon's longest-running cultural heritage event celebrating Latinidad, and all the great OPB reporting and storytelling you hear on this show is made possible by the support of many thousands of OPB members. We are able to keep this community resource going strong because of you. Thank you so much. Support our journalism by becoming an OPB sustaining member today at opb.org/pod. And now, back to the show. Spaces like Fiesta Mexicana in Woodburn provide a way for Mexican Americans to share our culture through dance, music, art, food, and so much more. But they're also a way for us to stay connected to our roots and our ancestors. Eduardo Cruz Torres Amitlan is a member of Hueca Omeacan, an Aztec dance group. He put it this way.
Es muy importante que las nuevas generaciones aprendan estas prácticas culturales, porque es a través de estas prácticas culturales que ellos van a heredar muchos aspectos culturales que van a fortalecer su existencia.
He said, "It is critical that our new generations learn about these cultural practices because it's through these same practices that they will inherit so many of the cultural values that will strengthen their lives." Alicia agrees it's important to stay connected to our culture, roots, and ancestors.
All of that shapes the people that we are right now, today. And it's also shaping the future generations. All of these younger children and grandchildren that Fiesta vendors and attendees are bringing, they're witnessing and being a part of this celebration, this active community building. And I mean, despite all of the fear, despite the ways that our homes are being taken away from us or that we are being taken away from our homes, we are still here and we are still speaking Spanish and we are still making ourselves visible and present. And it's really important because this is our home. We belong here too.
Especially right now, we're talking about this sense of home, and that sense of home is really being disrupted for folks. People are being deprived of that. It is a scary time for Latina communities and other communities of color. In fact, many cultural events throughout the state of Oregon canceled this year due to either fear of ICE enforcement and deportation by the Trump administration or fear of violence, or both. Just to list a few, Latino Fest in Madras, which happens in September, was canceled. The Fathers Group, an organization in Central Oregon, released a statement announcing their Juneteenth event would also not take place this year. That's usually held in Ben's Drake Park. Central Oregon Community College put out a statement that its Latinx Fiesta Celebración wouldn't take place, quote, out of an abundance of caution, and the list goes on. And to be clear, I truly understand why they canceled these events. Alicia, I'm wondering, is this one of the reasons you wanted to tell this story of Fiesta Mexicana? I mean, despite all this fear happening for people right now, here is this community that decided to go through with having the festival like in years past.
Absolutely. We were definitely interested in telling this story because we saw an increase of events that were being canceled and postponed. And this was an event that where the planning was not paused and plans as of, early August were still in place. Fiesta was still happening. And this is also the longest running cultural heritage event. It's a state designation that this event has. It is the only Latina cultural heritage event with that designation in the state of Oregon. There are other cultural events, but this is the only one that celebrates Latinidad. And so we wanted to be able to uplift the history of this event and talk about why people feel the need to continue to celebrate, even though it's a scary time right now. I didn't speak directly to anyone at the city of Woodburn about what precautions were in place or the planning that happened in order to keep folks safe, but I did see an increase of security this year. Luckily, there weren't any incidents where folks were taken away or where people felt fear. So I think the city of Woodburn did a really great job to support the continuation of this celebration. And I think it's a really proud moment to be able to uplift some of the history and the Latinidad of Woodburn.
So, Alicia, I know part of making this documentary was just talking to so many different people at the Fiesta. When you talked to people you met there, what did you hear from them about some of what we've been talking about? Why the event and the cultural pride and the sense of home that it brings for people is so important, especially now?
Yeah, well, I can start with Suki comes to mind. Suki is the founder of Portland Lucha Libre. And I remember very clearly that Suki talks about the importance of being able to share your culture and to demonstrate that we are not bad people.
Y mira cuánta cultura tenemos y cuánta gente tenemos. Y va creciendo más y más y más. Ven que hay mucha hispanidad, entonces cada quien pone su
Look at how our culture here has grown. Look at how many people we have here, and we are still growing more and more. There's a lot of Latino culture here, and we all put in our part. And everyone will see that we are not bad people.
I think an incredibly impactful thing to say when you realize that there are community members who are attending this event because they want to represent their culture and they feel proud and they want to show people that we're not bad people. Juan shares about his experience as a person that lives here in Oregon and is grateful for all of the opportunities that they have. And he has these flags that represent this new identity that his nephews are taking on and this new generation where we really want to show, folks want to show that they're proud, that they're Mexican, that they're Latine, and that they are also American. We are just another part of American culture here.
Creo que es importante que haya fiesta siempre, no importa lo que pase, porque cuando otras personas o el gobierno o los que te oprimen, lo que quisieran es apagarte, que no hables, que no digas, que no comuniques.
I think it's important that we always have fiesta, no matter what happens. Because when other people, the government tries to oppress you, what they want is to dim your light. They want to quiet you. They want you to not speak up. And if you allow them, then you're allowing them to diminish you. We have to continue to do this despite everything, despite the harm, despite the oppression, despite the discrimination. We must preserve because that's la lucha. That's what it's about.
And for Berenice, I think, you know, she really talked about feeling like this was her home because it is. She grew up here in Woodburn. She went to high school in Woodburn. She has attended the festival for many, many years. And so I think she really embodies the sense of what it's like to have this homecoming year after year.
I'm very proud to be Latina. Look at our culture. It's amazing.
The story of Fiesta Mexicana is really powerful. Some people might see this as just a festival. To many others, it's more than that. It's an act of resistance. This is a place of home founded by people, Mexican agricultural workers, farm workers, who wanted that sense of home here in Oregon. That story of resistance is something that Eduardo Cruz Torres Amictlan of Hueca Omeyacan points out. He's an Aztec dancer.
Es muy importante recalcar que se vive en un tiempo difícil, pero para nosotros en este continente han sido 500 años de resistencia.
It's important to emphasize that while we're living in difficult times for us on this continent, we have already spent 500 years in resistance, and it has not been easy. Colonization was something that radically changed the world for us. It changed our existence in a drastic way. And it's incredible that so many people still believe that the solution to our problem is to dehumanize each other because of the color of someone's skin, because of their customs, language, their accent, or their physical attributes. We have so many more things in common than we realize. The way I see it is that art, in all of its forms, whether it's music, painting, dance, poetry, is a form of revolution without violence. That is a form of resistance of saying, here we are, and we are connected to our roots. We are connected to our past. Even under the most unimaginable circumstances, our ancestors sang, they danced, they built community, they celebrated, and they had gratitude. They gave offerings. Even when life is difficult, even when we live in difficult times, we must be grateful for the simple fact that we exist.
One of the things I loved about the documentary short that you made for OPB was that you did your narration in Spanish. And as soon as I noticed that when I started watching it, I was like, that is so amazing. Why did you make that choice? Why was it important to you?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. You know, I think language accessibility is something that is often overlooked, and it is incredibly important. it is important for the people who are opening themselves up and sharing their stories with us to be able to have full access to this story, because it is a story about them, about their community, about the community that we live in. And so by making this a Spanish first project, we are prioritizing the storytellers who have granted us access to their opinions and experiences. And, I think the population of Spanish speakers in the Pacific Northwest and across the U.S. continues to grow. And it's really important to be able to create platforms where people feel included. Visibility is important, representation is important, and so therefore language accessibility is important. So it was critical to be able to feature narration in Spanish, because I want Berenice, and I want Juan, and I want Lalo, Eduardo to be able to see this and be fully immersed and have full access to this story that they're a part of.
Alicia, you have spent so much time immersed in this story. When you think of Fiesta Mexicana, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, when I think about Fiesta Mexicana, I think about it being like a little slice of my home. Es un lugar donde yo puedo hablar en español, puedo ser mí misma. Sometimes when I'm walking around town, I feel like I'm thinking in English way too much. But when I go to Fiesta, everything is in Spanish. I just automatically switch to this other part of my brain. I feel like I'm a member of this community that, like I mentioned, I've worked very hard and very actively to be a part of. Y se siente bonito poder estar en un lugar donde puedes ser la versión más auténtica de ti mismo, donde puedes hablar tu idioma, español es mi idioma natal. It's my first language. And to be able to be in that space where I can fully be myself, donde puedo hablar español con todos, donde todos me van a entender, donde me voy a ver a mí misma reflejada dentro de esa misma comunidad, it is definitely a slice of home.
Thank you so much for having this conversation and for your beautiful documentary.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today.
A special thank you to Alicia Avila, who produced the documentary Fiesta y Resistencia in collaboration with OPB's Oregon Experience. She also did the interviews you heard, which were filmed by cinematographer Christy Goshi. Thank you for listening to The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB. Mia Estrada produced this episode, and our technical director is Stephen Cray. Nalene Silva engineered the episode. The OPB podcast team also includes Julie Sabatier, Peter Frick-Wright, and Sage Van Wing. Another special thank you to Rolando Hernandez, who did the English voiceover in this episode. The music in the episode comes from Audio Network. And hey, if you have a question for us, we're all ears. Please reach out. Email theevergreen@opb.org. I'm Jen Chavez. Nos vemos.